Well, look, I came to Australia for a working holiday from England in 1980 and stayed up in Glaston for a while. That was a bit dodgy, so I moved down to Sydney just on a holiday, just for a couple of weeks. Stayed at the Hotel Mansions in King's Cross and saw the Rock Garden. It was a Thursday night. Mod night. They used to have mod nights on a Thursday night at the Rock Garden. So I went down there the first night and ran into Phil Robinson, Brad Little, Steve Datry, Don Hosey, who were the mods. There was one scooter. The 19th of July, I met Mr. Martin Fabok. He was called Prince Fabok, Bad Manners Fabok. And then they did a gig at the Sussex on the 16th of September. So I missed it and came back afterwards. Peter, Brett, Phil Ayres were there. Well, Peter was performing with that band, but I missed it. And later on that evening, Martin asked if I wanted to play keys in the band. So round to Hoodie's house, one of the girls there, Jeanette, bought a keyboard off her for $50, an old Yamaha, beautiful thing.
After a few Friday nights, I invited my old buddy, Brett, along to the Sussex. I introduced him to, my new friends. After a few Friday nights with me and Brett just hanging out there, this guy came up out of the blue, New Zealand guy, and said, do you play any instruments? Do you play, guitar or anything like that? Brett at that stage piped up and said, he plays sax and I play drums, as in Ted plays sax, Brett plays drums. This was Graham Hood. So Hoodie said, great, you want to be in a band? Come along to the rehearsal studios next week, bring your stuff, we'll just set up and we'll play. We're going to play ska. I'd played sax for about 6 weeks, about 7 years ago, and I didn't have a sax. So we were going to turn up to this rehearsal room, really lose face, look like absolute morons. So whatever it was going to take, I was going to be in this band. While I couldn't afford a sax, I could afford some slide whistles. I could afford some percussion instruments from Palings. So Thursday night the next week saw me at Palings spending all the money in the world I had, which was probably about $50, on some pretty lousy percussive instruments. And Brett and I turned up to rehearsals at Kent Street Studios.
Yes, I was involved in the Sydney punk scene in the late 70s, I guess, mid to late 70s. I sort of started to progress out of the punk scene, as you should, because it gets a bit stale after a while. And I was living in a house in Surrey Hills, and I happened to be rehearsing my guitar with some reggae record, which I can't remember now. And Graham Hood happened to walk past the door and went, oh, you play guitar, we need a guitarist. So next thing I ended up at Kent Street Studios, playing with the Allnighters with Ted Ayres instructing me on how to do the upbeat for the skank.
So it's like the Mad Hatter's Tea Party here.
It is indeed.
And that's probably the story of the Allnighters.
It is.
A bit Alice in Wonderland when you think about it.
I seem to remember the first few shows at the Sussex. We only had about 5 or 6 songs, didn't we?
Yes, but we fooled everyone. We played them twice.
Oh my God.
And I think when we took some time off to do a rehearsal and learn a few new songs, and on the eve of the next gig, Umberto, the original singer, got taken away by members of the police force for some unknown offence.
It was a private party or something.
It was a private party in a pub at Piermont. And up on the roof. And Umberto got dragged away, and then at the same time
So I was playing drums then, and you were doing backing vocals.
Yes, and then it seemed to all happen at once that Umberto got taken away and Dave, the roadie, decided he was a better drummer. So we got bumped up to the front row.
Dave, the roadie, was a much better drummer than I was, but you know.
Well, we got pushed up the front, and I think we just sort of made it up as we went along. And I remember being a bit self-conscious
Yeah, we were both nervous. I remember you and I having a conversation once saying, well, I wonder how long it's going to be before they give us the boot.
That's right.
So we sort of thought we were going to be temporary, really.
Yeah,
And,
I think that's how we came up with our routine, because we were so nervous that we started telling jokes and talking to each other and talking to the audience, and people started laughing, and we thought, hey, that's good.
Yeah, well, then we brushed up on our Marx Brothers movies, etc.
Stole a few old jokes, and one of them was funny.
And we've still got one.
We've still.
But yeah, I think that's what was going. You know, I was convinced we would be out.
Yeah.
By that stage, I guess. I wonder if Ted thought that as well on sax, because I don't think he knew how to tune his sax for the first few years.
No, and I don't think until Steve Luke came into the band anybody really knew what they were doing. It was all pretty touch and go, but I think that was the beauty of it. It was very spontaneous, and it was all nervous energy and youthful enthusiasm, and it connected.
It was just fun.
There was a really good rock newspaper called Roadrunner that started in Adelaide. And what do you know, there's an article, I think by Stuart Coupe, who used to write a lot of these things, about the Allnighters and the ska craze in Sydney. And I thought, oh my God, that is exactly where I want to be. Look at these guys, they really look like they know what they're doing. So I got on the bus and went to Sydney, and when I got here I had to virtually fight my way into the Manning Bar to see the Allnighters because I wasn't a student. And I got in there and I just thought, this band is just fantastic. And then I went and had a talk to them afterwards, very drunkenly. I don't know if they remember that. And then I went back to Adelaide and decided that I had to leave. And there was no point going to Sydney, they already had a ska band. But I would go to Melbourne and start a ska band.
I was at the Conservatorium in Sydney. I was doing a 2-year jazz course. This is about 81, 82. And a friend of mine who I just hung out with is a girl, Janet. She'd just been into the city and she said, oh, there's this guy I ran into in showbiz, a guy named Phil, and he was looking for he saw my cello and he thought, oh, is that a trombone or something? And he said, oh, I'm looking for a trombonist, do you know anyone? And she said, yeah, I know this guy, who I hang out with at the con. He's, a jazz player. And then she just came to me and gave me his number and I gave him a call. He said, would you be interested in being in the band? We need a trombone player. And he said, we're playing at the Governor's Pleasure in the Rocks, which is a pub in the Rocks, and I'd never heard of this place. And he said, would you like to come down and just check out the band? So that's how it started. So that was my first experience of even seeing a ska band. I had no idea what a ska band was.
Just happened that the week I decided to go to Melbourne, there was an ad in Duke, which was another good rock newspaper from Melbourne. And these guys had put in an ad. It was the Hearn Brothers, put in an ad for people who wanted to start a ska band. And I just happened to have my band, The Jumpers, touring to Melbourne for their one and only tour that weekend. So that was my audition, and by the end of the gig, I had signed up to join what became the Strange Tenants. I was enjoying the Strange Tenants, but boy, I still wanted to be in the Allnighters.
The music was pretty chaotic. It was like fast and furious, and I could see the sort of the, it had some musicality, that it had brass in it, which I guess I was always interested in, and everyone was like, the other people that I was studying with, they were all getting into jazz bands and having jams, and I felt it was, it wasn't quite, I didn't seem to be doing the right thing. I'm doing a jazz course, yet I'm going down listening to a ska band, and these guys want me to be in a ska band, and I really thought, am I sort of doing the right thing here? And I just went with it. I thought, well, this is different. I've never been in even a band. I mean, I'll just go with it and just see what happens.
Allnighters keyboard player Mark Taylor asked me, he didn't ask me if I'd like to join the band, but he said they were going to get a new drummer because they'd recently replaced their drummer, and I shouldn't go on too much about him, but they weren't happy with the way he was playing anyway. Their first drummer, Dave Bebb, was a fantastic drummer, and if he'd stayed, this story wouldn't be getting told now, that's for sure. But their second drummer was a good drummer, but not a ska drummer. So Mark said, "Well, if you're coming up to Sydney soon, maybe you could come and audition." I don't think he told anybody else in the band this, but within a couple of weeks I was in Sydney again, trying desperately to get into the Allnighters, and I always say I'm one of those lucky guys like Keith Moon who actually got to join their favourite band, and that's a very rare situation. Keith Moon famously went up to The Who and said he could play the drums better than their drummer, and we know the rest of that story. And I famously did the same thing, so I'm very pleased with myself, and I got to join my favourite band. It was only when I finally got to Sydney to live that I realised, A, that Mark hadn't really told the rest of the band, and B, that I'd never seen the Allnighters when I was sober. Luckily, they still turned out to be quite good.
The main place that I used to go was down the Sussex. And at that time, it was quite a mod venue, but they also used to play different styles of music, and I suppose that's where I was introduced to ska. And I remember nights down at the Sussex, and it was just pumping. It was packed. There was people coming from the North Shore. It was kind of the first time that I'd met people from all over Sydney that just had the same kind of inclination to listen to new music and not just what was on the radio at that time. So it was really fascinating and fun to see everybody sort of coming together over one cause, which was just to have fun, listen to good music, listen to new music. At that stage, we used to go down and see the sets a lot. The Allnighters actually played before the sets one night, and I think that's the first time that I was actually introduced to sort of the fun of ska music, and I think it's the first time that I'd actually met the Allnighters. So it was through these nights at the Sussex that I was sort of hanging out a little bit more with the Rudies, and they had this band called the Persuasions and asked me if I wanted to join and start singing with them. So it was really rough. We did a couple of gigs, and then I remember the next time we played at Sylvania and we actually supported the Allnighters, and I think the band literally fell apart on the stage that night. And it was also more that I got to meet the Allnighters and started chatting with them, and from there basically they asked me to get up and sing with them. So that's basically how my association with the Allnighters began, was with the Persuasions and the Allnighters at Sylvania Hotel.
So we're pretty rough to start with, obviously, but it picked up pretty quickly. And when Roger came along, he got us out of the Sussex, and things just sort of skyrocketed really, really fast.
Yeah, well, as a natural consequence, I guess, of attracting such a adoring public, as it were, we decided we should make a record. Which, with the help of Roger Grierson, who I'd met in the punk days, who now had a record company called Green.
And I think I first became aware of the Allnighters when Travis came to see me when I was at Larrikin, and I did have my little label, Green Records. They had a punk label called Doublethink. That folded, and we started a new label called Stuart Cooper and I called Green. And Travis came to see me, and he went, we've been playing around, and we played the Vulcan Hotel, and 400 people turned up, and that piqued my interest. And I went, really, 400 people?
We were approached by a management company Stuart Cooper and Roger Grierson ran called Green. Management? Are you kidding? We'd sign anything.
I then gave them a few shows. I do recall one at the Pattinson Town Hall, and at that stage the Allnighters, apart from the ska scene, were relatively unknown. In fact, I saw a picture of the poster last week, and it had to we put ska in brackets after it on the basis that people wouldn't necessarily know who they were or what they were doing on that bill. Band played well, everybody turned up. I learned how to spell Allnighters correctly, so a lot of things were learnt that night.
I've been in Australia for about 2.5 weeks, and I was told to go to Paddington Hall to see a couple of bands that I'd probably like. And I went along, and the Allnighters were playing. And I'll never ever forget it as long as I live. Fresh from London, I'm majorly depressed, because I was just dragged out of London at 18 in 1981, so London was just going nuts. And the Allnighters were on stage. And I was sure, I was convinced that I'd actually seen this band before somewhere else. and it like gives me goosebumps right now. And I knew there and then, I thought, well, I'm home. This is what I'm going to be doing this. And I knew there and then there was no way after I jumped on stage and did my little bad version of Chav Smash, I was going anywhere. I said to my sister on the way home, I said, I'm going to be hanging around with them. And I made sure I did.
Grierson also knew that what we had to do was get a record out as soon as possible. We didn't have too many original songs, but we did have one that the crowds loved called She Made a Monkey Out of Me.
I had a song that I used to play in my original punk band called Bananas, and the hook line on it was She Made a Monkey Out of Me. And I was at home one day with Umberto, and I said, oh, do you want to listen to my old band? And he went, yeah. So I played him these 3 songs, one of them being Bananas. And then we turned up to rehearsals the next night or whatever, and all of a sudden Umberto's got this song called She Made a Monkey Out of Me. You know, how dare you fucking steal my song? Anyway, I think it was a bit of a standoff there, and everyone sort of calmed the situation down, and I said, well, he's just stolen one of my songs. And Pete said, well, why can't we just rewrite it, make it our song? And we did, and it was a big smash hit across the world.
Not into the studio we went. A few hours later, we're back down the pub. Next thing you know, in my memory, seems like it happened 5 minutes later, there was pressing. It was on Triple J, or in those days Double J, on high rotation from the moment it hit the shelves. Record Planet, Phantom Records, sold out first day.